She was reborn with memories of the future, and she stole everything I once had. My fiancé, my family's trust, even my place in the sun. But while she rewrote my fate, I remembered every scar she gave me. This time I won't just survive her. I'll make sure the life she stole becomes the nightmare she never wakes from. The air in Oak Ridge always smelled like damp earth and morning dew, especially in early spring. That day I stood by the village bulletin board under the sycamore tree, straightening my blouse and smoothing down my braids, waiting for him. Caleb Hart. He was due back from military leave. My fiancé, the brigade leader's proud nephew, the man everyone said I was lucky to be betrothed to. And I suppose I was, by 1975 standards. We were to register our marriage papers next week, and the whole village was already whispering about what kind of wedding feast the Hart family would throw. I had sewn a new floral skirt for the occasion. Mama had offered her best embroidered red cloth to wrap the wedding pastries. Even our neighbor Mrs. Yao had said, "Lillian, you'll be the envy of Oak Ridge. Caleb is a good one." I believed it too. Until that morning. Until little Paul came running from the village entrance, breathless and pale, his words tumbling over one another like a stream trying to outrun itself. "Lillian, something happened, at the river. Caleb, Veronica Lane, he kissed her." The blood drained from my face. "What did you say?" I whispered, my heart dropping like a stone in a well. "I saw it. He was giving her mouth to mouth, but they were holding each other like husband and wife. Everyone saw." My basket fell from my hands, the peaches inside rolling into the dirt. I ran. I didn't care how it looked. I didn't care that my skirt was getting muddied at the hem. I just needed to see it for myself. I needed it to be a lie. But it wasn't. At the riverbank, villagers had gathered in a loose circle, murmuring, eyes wide. And there, in the center of it all, was Caleb, his military shirt soaked, clinging to his body, kneeling on the ground, cradling Veronica Lane in his arms like she was porcelain. Her eyes were shut, her lips slightly parted, her delicate fingers curled against his chest. The white ribbon in her hair fluttered faintly in the breeze. My breath caught. I froze. Our eyes met. His and mine. For a fraction of a second, guilt flickered in them. Just a flash. He shifted as if to explain, but then Veronica stirred and let out a pitiful moan. Without another word, he lifted her into his arms and ran straight to the clinic. Not toward me. Not even a glance back. Toward her. The villagers followed at a distance, some clucking their tongues, others whispering. Shameless. Holding a woman like that in public. That Veronica's always been a sly one. She knows how to cry and make men lose their heads. I stood rooted, fists clenched so tightly that my nails dug into my palms. The humiliation burned worse than any slap. Till I followed. But as I had to. By the time I reached the clinic, the door was slightly ajar. I heard her voice, soft, syrupy, and full of manufactured gratitude. "Thank you, Caleb. I thought I was going to die." "There's no need to thank me," he said, his voice gentle. Too gentle. I pushed the door open. There she was, draped in his jacket, her petite form curled up on the examination cot, her eyes blinking up at him like he'd single-handedly pulled her from the gates of heaven. And him? His ears were red. He was blushing. A man with a fiancée didn't blush like that at another woman. Something inside me snapped. I strode forward and slapped him across the face. The sound echoed like a whip crack in the silence. "You're disgusting," I hissed, then turned to Veronica and slapped her too. "You knew he was engaged. You knew we were to be married next week." She gasped, clutching her cheek, eyes wide and shimmering. And for the briefest moment I saw something flicker in them. Not surprise. Not hurt. Hatred. I leaned forward, my voice low and cold. "Don't pretend you don't know what you're doing. You're not some helpless girl who slipped and fell into a river. You've been circling him like a vulture since you got off the train." I didn't mean," she whimpered, her lip trembling. "I was just grateful. And you're trying to ruin me. You're slandering me. I'll never be able to hold my head up again." Then dramatically she threw off the jacket, burst through the door barefoot and ran toward the river again. Caleb shouted, "Veronica," and bolted after her, leaving me standing there, hands shaking. I didn't run. I didn't cry. But I collapsed moments later, right there in the clinic, as the weight of betrayal slammed into me like a blow to the ribs. When I woke, the entire village had already turned on me. She slapped him in front of everyone. Too harsh. Even if she was hurt, that was excessive. I always thought Lillian was a bit too proud. Guess Caleb finally saw through her. My world unraveled in a single morning. 3 days later, the Hart family came to our home. My parents thought it was to set the wedding date. It wasn't. They came with folded hands and polite words, saying Caleb had made a mistake, that perhaps the engagement was rushed, and that Veronica was more suited for his temperament. I didn't speak. Not when Mama screamed. Not when Papa said, "After everything we've done for your family." I just stood there, mute, watching the crimson threads of my wedding skirt unravel at the hem. That night, I curled into my blanket, listening to the distant cries of a fox and the soft murmur of the wind. I tried to sleep, but no matter how tightly I shut my eyes, the weight in my chest wouldn't go away. And as I drifted off, I had no idea that what waited for me in my sleep would forever change the course of my life. After the engagement was broken, the village moved on quicker than I could catch my breath. Veronica Lane didn't just take Caleb. She took my name, my place, my future, and wore them like they'd always belonged to her. She fluttered around Oak Ridge in soft linen and cherry blossom smiles, leaning gently on Caleb's arm as if she hadn't torn two families apart just days before. She passed steaming buns to the elders, complimented their stitching, helped sweep courtyards with the grace of a young maiden from a storybook. The villagers melted for her. Even those who had once scolded her flirtations suddenly found 100 reasons to defend her. "She's from the city," they said. "She's different. She doesn't mean harm. She's just clumsy, not cunning. She didn't steal Caleb. Maybe he just saw her true heart." And I was the villainess now. The hysterical ex-fiancée who slapped him in public. The jealous country girl who couldn't handle losing. Everywhere I went, silence followed. I stopped going out unless I had to. Mama begged me to hold my head high. Papa said nothing but left steamed sweet potatoes by my door. I read until my eyes burned and practiced equations in the dirt behind the house. If I couldn't change the past, I would beat her at the one thing she had left to claim. The reinstated National College entrance exam. While Veronica paraded around like a bride in a revolutionary opera, I dug up Papa's old textbooks from under the grain bin, wiped off decades of dust, and studied by kerosene lamp into the late hours. Veronica, of course, didn't let me forget who had Caleb now. One morning, I passed by the clinic to refill a water jar and saw her sitting outside, brushing Caleb's damp hair from his forehead. He looked up at her with adoration. I hated him for it. Hated him for believing her, for not even questioning how convenient her fall into the river had been the day of his return. But Caleb Hart was the kind of man who loved to feel needed, and Veronica knew just how to play the part. Within 2 weeks, the Hart family had accepted her like she was one of their own. Mrs. Hart beamed as if Veronica were her own daughter. Their wedding date was set without so much as a pause. I heard it from the village tailor. "You know she brought silk from the city," the tailor whispered. "Soft as fog and white with red embroidery. It's the most expensive fabric I've ever seen. She gave me candied hawthorns just for doing the hem." The wedding was held in front of the entire brigade headquarters. Banners in red. Firecrackers. A band borrowed from the next village. The whole of Oak Ridge came out to celebrate. Except me. I stayed home, sat on my straw mat, stared at the math problems in front of me and willed my hands to stop shaking. Mama peeked in once and said, "Don't listen to the drums, Lillian. They're not meant for you." "I'm not listening," I replied. But I was. Every beat of that drum hammered the truth into my chest. I had lost everything. That night I couldn't sleep. The next morning I woke before dawn and poured all of it, all the anger, the betrayal, the loneliness, into study. I memorized formulas. I rewrote grammar passages. I practiced essay responses until my hands cramped. Veronica, meanwhile, bathed in the glow of new-married bliss. Caleb bought her a bicycle. A sewing machine followed. Then a radio. All 4 symbols of rural prosperity. They called her the luckiest bride in the province. "She'll bring him wealth," Mrs. Lynn whispered in the market. I always knew she was special. I clenched my jaw and kept walking. They didn't see the way she looked at me when no one was watching. The smirk barely hidden behind her lashes. The sweetness that turned sour the moment her back was to the crowd. And then came the college entrance exam registration. Veronica signed up with a big show of innocence. "Oh, there's an exam?" I guess I should try it too just for fun. No one suspected her ambition. But I knew. I had seen it. In the dream. Though I hadn't told anyone yet, the dream from that night after the annulment still haunted me. It had played like a novel. A horrifying, cruel, unchangeable novel. In it I had watched myself spiral. Forced to marry a drunk, ridiculed, eventually killed while pregnant in a crumbling hut. Veronica had stood over my grave in that dream, wiping crocodile tears and saying, "She brought it upon herself." At the time I thought it was just trauma. My mind fabricating nightmares out of heartbreak. But the longer I lived, the more scenes from the dream started becoming real. I dreamed the wedding before it happened. I saw Veronica's silk cheapao before it arrived. I knew about the exam before it was announced. And if that dream continued to come true, then my death was coming next. But I wouldn't let that happen. I began to fight it in the only way I could, by trying to escape. The exam was the key. I studied day and night. I avoided Veronica. I smiled at the villagers no matter what they whispered. I even started tutoring the neighbor's daughter to earn a few coins for exam fees. Then came the morning of the test. I hadn't slept much. My hair was tightly braided, my papers packed in a cloth satchel. Papa walked me to the brigade gate before dawn, pressing a steamed bun into my hand. "Eat before you go," he said, patting my shoulder. "And whatever happens, you've already made us proud." I smiled weakly and stepped onto the transport cart. But 20 minutes into the journey I doubled over. The pain hit me like a cleaver to the gut. I gasped, clutching my stomach, bile rising in my throat. The cart swayed. Someone shouted. My vision blurred. I didn't make it to the exam. Instead I was carried into the clinic. Ironically the same one where Caleb had held Veronica so tenderly weeks ago. I lay there, curled up on the same cot, biting my lip until it bled to avoid screaming. "It might be stomach poisoning," the doctor muttered. "Or nerves." I knew it wasn't nerves. I had never been so sure of anything in my life. Veronica had done something. Later that afternoon, still too weak to sit up, I heard voices outside the clinic window. "Did you hear? Veronica Lane got the highest score in the entire province. She's amazing. Beautiful and brilliant." Caleb really struck gold. That night I wept until my throat was raw. But it didn't stop there. The very next week, Veronica came to my doorstep with a smile. "I heard you fell ill," she said sweetly. "I hope it's nothing serious. By the way, I was speaking with Auntie Wu, her nephew Toby. He's single and looking. You two would suit each other." I stared at her. "Toby Fields," I said coldly. "The loafer who drinks sorghum wine all day and tried to steal a pig last New Year's?" "He's just misunderstood," she replied with a shrug. "And honestly, Lillian, it's not like you have many options left, right?" I shut the door in her face. But it was too late. Days later, Auntie Wu approached Mama. Toby had taken a liking to me. His family suddenly wanted a match. Mama refused, but Veronica had already planted the seeds. The gossip spread like wildfire. "Lillian and Toby? Makes sense. She needs someone to marry. After what she pulled with Caleb, she can't afford to be picky." I was cornered. No offers came after that, just murmurs and pitying looks. That night I had the dream again. Only this time it was longer. I saw myself dragging my feet behind a staggering Toby Fields. He was drunk, angry, yelling. He hit me. Again and again. I was pregnant. I begged for him to stop. He didn't. He beat me until I crumpled to the ground, blood soaking the hem of my dress. My last thought before the darkness took me? Veronica won. And then I heard her voice in the dream. She was always too bitter to survive. I woke with a scream caught in my throat. And I knew. The dream wasn't a dream. It was prophecy. Or fate. But even fate could be broken. I sat up slowly, my heart pounding, every nerve humming with determination. If I was going to die in some mud hut, it would not be because I let her script my story. I would not go quietly. Not this time. When you've seen your own death, when you've lived it in a dream and felt the cold silence of being forgotten, you don't return the same. I didn't cry the next morning. I didn't rage. I simply sat at the kitchen table, sharpened my pencil with Mama's paring knife, and opened a fresh sheet of brown envelope paper. If Veronica Lane was allowed to be reborn with a map of the future, then I would use every inch of what she hadn't seen coming. This life, she wasn't the only one playing the long game. First I began to record. I bought a cheap notebook from the supply station with the coins I'd earned tutoring the neighbor's daughter. I wrapped it in a cover made from old newspaper and wrote one word on the inside in large blocky characters. Evidence. Every time Veronica fluttered her lashes and pretended not to know how to scrub laundry, I wrote it down. Every time Caleb came back with candy face cream or silk ribbons meant only for her, I noted the date, the item, the cost. Every whispered conversation between her and someone in the brigade yard? I copied it in shorthand tucked in the margins. I watched everything. Then I found my voice. One evening, after sweeping the entire courtyard twice just to stall long enough for Papa to fall asleep, I sat beneath the kerosene lamp with my paper and ink. I wrote the first letter in neat practice strokes, addressed to the Provincial Transportation Department. I introduced myself plainly, stated my name, my status as a former fiancé, and listed what I had witnessed. That brigade driver Caleb Hart had broken an engagement for an inappropriate relationship with an educated youth named Veronica Lane, and that this relationship had caused public disorder, gossip, and embarrassment to the local work unit. I included the date of the river incident, witness names, even phrases from Veronica's own lips. Then, for good measure, I wrote a second version, this time addressed anonymously to a known political rival of Caleb's uncle in the county headquarters. If one letter didn't sting, the second would. When I slipped them into the post sack at dawn, my hands didn't tremble. I had never been so calm. And then I pulled someone in. Martha King, the sharp-tongued neighbor who always seemed to be everywhere gossip brewed, was the last person I expected to trust. But Martha wasn't like the others. She didn't melt when Veronica offered her steamed corn cakes. She didn't swoon at the sight of Caleb's bicycle or his creased military trousers. No. Martha rolled her eyes, sniffed loudly, and muttered, "A fox in silk is still a fox." She was also the only person in the entire brigade who had defended me after the engagement ended. So I asked her to walk with me after work. "You're plotting something," she said the moment we reached the outer field. "I'm gathering truth," I said simply. "You always say you're good at collecting things others overlook. I need someone like that." Martha raised an eyebrow, arms crossed over her chest. "You offering me money?" "No. I'm offering you the satisfaction of watching that girl's smug face fall apart." He grinned like a fox. "Now that's a proper bribe." Then the cracks began. It took only 8 days for Caleb to receive notice from the provincial unit. A formal investigation into moral violations and misuse of brigade standing. He was demoted from transport supervisor to farm laborer. No radio. No bicycle. No leadership role. I watched from the side of the well as Mrs. Hart screamed at Caleb outside their courtyard. "What were you thinking?" she shrieked, flinging a pot to the ground. "You embarrassed the entire family. You gave up a perfectly good fiancé for this walking misfortune." "I didn't do anything illegal," Caleb shouted back. "Not illegal," his brother snapped, "but stupid." Veronica appeared then like a ghost conjured by thunder. Eyes red, voice soft. "Don't blame Caleb. If you need to blame someone, blame me. I'm willing to take the punishment." Oh, she was good. She even managed to squeeze out a tear and flinch when Mrs. Hart called her a cursed little fox. But the damage was done. And Oak Ridge began to whisper again. People noticed that Veronica never worked more than a few minutes in the fields before twisting her ankle or needing water. People noticed she had candy for the children, but never enough to share equally. People noticed that she smiled too hard when praised and scowled too fast when ignored. It started with one woman saying, "She's too lucky to be real." Then another said, "She's sweet but there's something." And Martha? Martha added fuel to every spark. "She spends more money than Caleb earns," she told the barber's wife. "You think a city girl came here broke? She's hiding something." I didn't have to lift a finger after that. Caleb began to crack. I saw him one afternoon by the tool shed, smoking a cigarette behind the grain sacks. He looked older. Defeated. Gone was the proud brigade leader's nephew. Veronica approached him, placing a delicate hand on his arm. He flinched before relaxing. And for the first time I saw it. Doubt. He still loved her, but now there was hesitation in his eyes. Maybe he heard the whispers. Maybe the magic was wearing off. Maybe he missed how easy it used to be when I was the one fetching him tea, not dragging him into scandal. It didn't matter. I was no longer waiting for his realization. I was watching the story bend. I stayed silent. I stayed smiling. Every time Veronica passed me now, she tensed. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. She knew I was watching. She didn't know what I had done. That's what scared her most. The villagers didn't know either. But they started treating me differently. Not with warmth, but with caution. As if they'd finally realized I wasn't the tragic ex-fiancé anymore. I was something else now. Something dangerous. And still I waited. Because I knew from the dream that there was more to come. That Veronica would try again. That her thirst for status hadn't ended with Caleb's demotion. But I also knew this. The house she built, on lies, manipulation and stolen affections, would never stand forever. Not while I was still standing. Not while I still held the match. Veronica Lane didn't like silence. She didn't know how to sit still in it, didn't know how to exist in the space between whispers. After Caleb's demotion, the village had grown quiet around her. Not openly hostile but cautious, wary. She would arrive with mooncakes in hand or speak softly at the well, and the women would smile tightly before turning back to their laundry. The warmth was gone. Her radiance, once blinding, now flickered in the draft of suspicion. And that terrified her. She had built her new life on the illusion of goodness. The rescued girl, the humble wife, the reborn sweetheart. But the cracks were spreading fast and she could feel it. So she did what women like her always do when the adoration starts to slip. She staged another miracle. It started with whispers. That Mr. Lin, the old revolutionary who lived by the cattle shed, had fallen sick. That his 7-year-old grandson Jean had wandered too close to the river lately. That Veronica, dear sweet Veronica, had taken an interest in caring for them, bringing rice, herbal soup, playing big sister to the quiet boy with dirt on his knees. I knew something was coming. Veronica never did anything without a reason. And kindness for her always had an audience. So I waited. I watched. And then one humid afternoon, Martha King came bursting through the side of my house with a face like thunder and her shawl falling off one shoulder. I heard something, she panted. Something real. I set down my pen. What? She glanced over her shoulder. Toby Fields. I saw him near the river earlier. Looked nervous. Like he was waiting. My pulse picked up. Alone. Worse, she said. He was muttering. Talking to himself. Kept saying, just a little push and she'll owe me forever. You know who the she is. Veronica. The dream returned to me in pieces. Veronica dragging Jean Lin from the water, soaked and gasping, villagers crying with admiration. A rebirth heroine never stays down for long. She had done this before. And she was doing it again. I grabbed my coat. By the time we reached the edge of the river, Toby was crouched by a patch of reeds, whispering toward the path where Jean would usually wander after school. I didn't wait. I marched down the hill, picked up a branch and slammed it into Toby's leg. He yelped, tripped backward and fell on his backside, stunned. What the? Don't pretend you don't know who I am, I snapped. I've heard enough. You lay one finger on that boy and I swear I'll drag you to the brigade gate myself. Martha emerged behind me, panting and red in the face. Toby Fields, you idiot. You think you're going to be the hero of this village? You don't even own a clean shirt. He scrambled up. You don't understand, she promised. She said she'd talk to her husband, get me land if I helped. And just like that the whole thing tumbled out. How Veronica had bribed him with food. Promised to clear his gambling debts. Swore she'd secure him a wife through Caleb's connections. All he had to do was push Jean near the bank, time it right and she'd come running. He kept talking even as we dragged him to the village center. Even as the villagers gathered. Even as Mr. Lin appeared at the far edge of the road, Jean in hand, eyes wide. Even as Caleb stepped forward, silent and stunned. Veronica arrived last. She wore a white cotton dress and a red scarf tied neatly at her throat. She came running, face painted with the perfect balance of panic and concern, until she saw Toby standing there, tears streaming, dirt on his knees. Her expression froze. You, she began. Spare us the performance, I said. We're tired of your plays. Murmurs rose through the crowd like fire licking dry branches. She set this up? She used that poor child for attention? She had Toby do it? Veronica turned to Caleb, reaching for him, her eyes glossy. I didn't ask him to hurt the boy. I only wanted to be helpful. He misunderstood. Caleb, you have to believe me. He didn't move. In fact, for the first time he looked at her as if she were a stranger. A brigade official appeared minutes later. Toby was taken in for questioning, shaking and blubbering. Veronica was slapped with a formal fine of 200 yuan for endangering public safety and inciting disorder. But the real punishment didn't come from officials. It came from the people. They stopped opening their doors when she knocked. They stopped accepting her pastries and soup. They stopped calling her blessed and started calling her cursed. Even Mrs. Hart, who had once defended her with fervor, refused to let her inside their home without checking her hands for mischief. Veronica Lane, the angel of Oak Ridge, had fallen from the sky. And she hadn't landed softly. As for me, I said nothing. When people passed me now, they lowered their voices or gave respectful nods. I wasn't a threat anymore. I was a presence. A reminder that not every girl would stay silent. That some of us didn't cry when discarded. We took notes. We waited. We learned. Caleb didn't speak to me. But I saw it in his eyes. He knew. He knew he'd been played from the riverbank to the vows. And now he had to live in the mess he helped build. Veronica still clung to him. Still smiled through gritted teeth. Still offered dumplings that no one touched. But Caleb's back had straightened with discomfort. Mine had never been stronger. By early autumn, Veronica Lane was no longer welcome in Oak Ridge. Not in homes, not in gossip, not even in the fields. The fine had wounded her pride more than her purse, and her halo had dimmed into a thin, mocking outline. No one believed in her fragile innocence anymore. The only person she had left was Caleb, and even he looked over her shoulder more often than into her eyes. But people like Veronica don't go down easy. They slither. They adapt. They strike again, harder, smarter, deadlier. I knew she'd try something else. I just didn't know how far she'd go. Not yet. The rumors started small. That I'd been seen sneaking food toward the cattle shed at odd hours. That my family was getting help from somewhere. Money, supplies, even books we couldn't possibly afford. And then it turned darker. Whispers in the rice mill. I heard the Moores are tied to the Lynns. You mean the old man they won't let near party matters? Exactly. They say the girl, Lillian, she's been passing information to him. I heard these whispers in the same way you hear a nail tap glass. Quiet but sharp enough to cut if you're not careful. I said nothing. Just kept walking. But my hands began to shake again when no one was looking. Because I knew where this was heading. Veronica hadn't just decided to let me be. She had taken her game to the next level. The kind that could get a family disappeared overnight. The kind that wasn't just petty. It was political. That evening, I lingered near the back edge of the hills, under the pretense of gathering firewood. The cattle shed sat at the far edge of the brigade's reach. Quiet, gray, shunned like an open secret. Mr. Lynn and little Jean kept mostly to themselves now. Ever since Veronica's last scheme failed, people avoided them like they carried plague. And yet I saw her. Veronica, in her cleanest blouse, walking toward the back path with a basket in her arms. She stopped short near the copse of trees behind the shed. Then she knelt. And spoke to someone hidden in the shadow. I crept closer, heart pounding. They don't visit often, she was saying. But when they do, it's always at night. They carry small parcels wrapped in cloth. I've seen the older girl, Lillian, pass something to the old man. Could be blueprints, could be reports. I don't ask questions. I just thought you should know. A man's voice answered, sharp and clipped. Why should we trust you? Because I want to help, she hissed. Because they're dangerous. And because I know you people are looking for leverage. There was a pause, then a low chuckle. Leverage costs. I don't want anything, she lied, breath catching. Just, don't forget I came to you first. The sound of boots shifting in soil. A thin blade of metal reflected moonlight. If you're lying, girl, we won't just hurt you. We'll go after the ones you're protecting too. I'm not lying, she whispered. I swear. And then she turned and left, straightening her basket as if she had just dropped off mushrooms for an uncle. She didn't see me, but I saw her. And I knew. This wasn't about me anymore. It was about my family. That night I wrote another letter. This one was shorter. Sharper. Marked urgent and hand-delivered at dawn to the town police station. Addressed to Officer Wei Zhang. It contained everything. The date, the time, the overheard exchange, the names, the location. I didn't dramatize. I didn't beg. I wrote like someone who had nothing left to lose. Wei Zhang arrived before dusk with 2 plainclothes officers. They said nothing to the brigade. They said nothing to the hearts. But I saw them tailing Veronica as she left the storehouse with her arms full of flour and her face full of fake smiles. They followed her all the way to the base of the hills. I stayed home that night pretending to read, hands shaking behind the page. Then came the knock on our door. Officer Zhang stood there, still in uniform, holding my letter. "You were right," he said. I swallowed. "What will happen?" "We'll interrogate the outsiders. They're connected to something larger than just Oak Ridge. But we've got enough to hold them." He paused. "As for Veronica Lane..." He didn't finish. He didn't need to. The next morning, Veronica was summoned for questioning. The brigade tried to keep it quiet, but nothing stays secret for long in a village like ours. By midday everyone knew. By nightfall she was back, white-faced, red-eyed, walking like a ghost. Caleb stood outside their gate, unmoving. "You knew," he said, barely audible. She reached for him. "They tricked me. I thought they were government officials. I just wanted to protect us." "No, Veronica," he said, stepping back. "You wanted to protect yourself." She fell to her knees, sobbing into the dirt. The same dirt where she'd once staged a rescue. The same ground where she'd climbed over me. Now she had no audience left. For days the village held its breath. The outsiders were gone. Quietly removed. Whether arrested or vanished, no one said. But the danger passed. And still Veronica stayed, stubbornly clinging to the ruins of her life. But her husband no longer touched her. The villagers no longer pitied her. And I finally slept. For the first time in months I lay down without fear. I had not just survived. I had protected something. Not just myself, but truth. I didn't expect anything. Not praise. Not reward. And certainly not a knock on my door from the same officer I had helped with trembling fingers and a pounding heart. But 3 days after the investigation ended, Officer Wei Zhang returned to Oak Ridge. This time he wore plain clothes, but there was an unmistakable authority in the way he walked. Confident, steady, like he already knew the outcome of every decision before making it. He asked for me by name. Mama wrung her hands nervously as I stepped outside. He greeted me with a nod, then said words I would never forget. "You didn't just stop a scheme, Miss Moore," he said. "You may have prevented an intelligence leak that could have endangered lives far beyond this village." I blinked. "I just did what I had to." "You did more than that." He paused, then handed me a sealed envelope with a red wax stamp. "A recommendation," he explained. "To the Provincial Academy in Nanshire. They're training a new batch of officers and analysts. People with sharp minds and strong spines. People like you." I looked down at the letter. My name was typed in bold at the top. For the first time in my life I saw it associated not with gossip, betrayal, or pity, but with promise. With purpose. "You'll need to pass a preliminary interview, of course," he added. "But if you choose to go, the doors will be open. Go." The word echoed in my chest like a heartbeat. Go. Leave behind the pain, the stares, the dust-filled rooms where dreams once died. Go. Not to run but to rise. Thanked him. Bowed even. Not because I was grateful for his praise, but because I had waited my entire life for this kind of chance. And I had earned it. Not through luck. Not through manipulation. But by surviving what was meant to destroy me. The village changed around me after that. People who once whispered behind their hands now smiled when I passed. Some nodded. A few offered fruit or books or quiet advice about life in the city. The children began greeting me by name. And Veronica? She never greeted me again. She stayed hidden in the shadows of her collapsing world, barely venturing beyond the Hart compound. I heard through Martha that Caleb had stopped sleeping in their room, that he had started drinking, not to the point of disgrace but enough to show regret. Regret has a smell. It clings to a man like sweat on a shirt. And I could smell it on him every time he passed by, eyes avoiding mine. I felt nothing. No pity. No satisfaction. Just stillness. The kind that comes when a storm is finally over. The day I received confirmation from the Provincial Academy, the first frost kissed the fields. I held the telegram in both hands and stared at the single line that changed everything. Miss Lillian Moore, accepted. Report to Nanshire Central Station, November 4th. Mama wept when she read it. Papa, though long gone, felt closer than ever that night as I knelt by his framed portrait, whispering the news he would have been proud to hear. "I'm going to wear that brown coat you left behind," I told him. "The one with the brass buttons. I'll represent us both." I began to pack the next morning. Not just clothes but history. Letters, certificates, a copy of the old Constitution Papa loved to read aloud after dinner. Every item I placed into the suitcase felt like closing a chapter. A painful, blood-stained chapter that had left me bruised but breathing. My final evening in Oak Ridge was quiet. I stood by the gate as the sun dipped low, painting the horizon in gold. Then I saw her. Veronica. She was leaning against a post near the well, her figure thinner than I remembered, scarf wrapped too tightly around her pale throat. She said nothing. Just looked at me. I didn't wave. She didn't flinch. But her eyes said everything. "How did you win?" I wanted to answer her out loud. "You rewrote the past, Veronica. But I remembered it. And I used it to survive you." Dad, I walked away. My steps were firm. My head was high. I had come into this village as a daughter. I was leaving as a woman reborn. Nanture smelled different than home. Less like soil and smoke. More like ambition and cement. The Provincial Law Enforcement Academy stood like a fortress of modernity. Rows of cold white buildings framed by precise hedges and gleaming glass windows. Everyone walked with purpose. Cadets in neatly pressed uniforms. Officers barking orders. Secretaries with typewriters clacking like machine guns in rhythm. And then there was me, Lillian Moore. Fresh off the train from Oak Ridge with Papa's brass button coat and Mama's stitched scarf in my suitcase. I stood out before I even spoke. They called me the countryside pick. Some smirked. Others ignored me. But I had survived worse than side glances. I had survived Veronica Lane. The academy was brutal in its own way. Mornings began at 4:30 with drills. Afternoons were lectures. Constitutional law, criminal intelligence, political theory. Nights were simulations, debates, reports, decoding exercises. My accent made me stick out. My clothes marked me as provincial. But I never missed a score. Never faltered. Never let a smirk go unanswered. The final simulation came on our 6th week. A mock intelligence op meant to test leadership strategy and risk under pressure. Cadets were divided into 6 teams. Each team was assigned a threat group to track, infiltrate, and neutralize using only fake dossiers, planted clues, and coded intercepts. I was placed on the smallest team. With the fewest resources. With 2 cadets who didn't even pretend to respect me. "Just don't mess it up, village girl," one of them grunted. "We'll do the heavy lifting." I didn't argue. Instead, I spent that first night cross-referencing all 78 pages of the simulation brief. By day 2 I had decoded the aliases. By day 3 I planted false tips in the opposing team's informant logs. By day 4, our team ambushed every other cell and completed the capture 2 hours before deadline. The instructor announced the results with narrowed eyes. "Team 6, he said, voice clipped. "Lead strategist, Lillian Moore." The silence that followed was the sweetest sound I'd heard in years. They didn't smirk after that. Meanwhile, Oak Ridge crumbled behind me. Martha's letters came in clumsily sealed envelopes, each one shakier than the last. Caleb finally filed for separation. Veronica tried crying to his mother again. Didn't work. "She's lost it, Lil. I think she's really lost it." Said you stole her ending. And then this one 2 weeks later. "She's in Nanture. I don't know how. Said she had to see you. Said she'd rewrite it all back." I knew she would come eventually. But I didn't expect her to stand outside the academy gates in broad daylight, dressed in some poor imitation of a student uniform. Nor did I expect her to look so diminished. Not dramatic. Not divine. Just broken. Her hair hung loose and brittle. Her eyes, once always rimmed with cleverness, now looked sunken. White. Frantic. "Lillian," she screamed as guards blocked her from stepping further. "I need to talk to you. I need to explain." I stopped walking. Just 10 feet away. "I don't owe you anything," I said quietly. "Not a word." She trembled. "You don't understand. We're the same." We both woke up again. "I'm not the villain. I'm the girl who tried to survive." My blood turned cold. "You stole my life," I said. "You killed me, in that last version, with your lies, your manipulation, your rebirth game." Veronica's lips quivered. "You can't pretend it didn't happen," she cried. You remember too. I know you do. Why else would you keep winning now? Why else? She lunged forward, slipping past one guard before being tackled by another. The courtyard erupted in gasps. Cadets froze. Instructors stepped out of offices. Within seconds she was pinned, arms behind her back, eyes still fixed on mine. Let me in, she shrieked. I'm one of you. I belong here too. The chief guard shook his head. Impersonation. Trespassing. Possibly delusional. Get her to holding. As they dragged her away, she turned one last time. I'm not the monster, she sobbed. I'm not the monster you think I am. I stood there unmoved. Because I didn't think she was a monster. I thought she was something worse. A coward who couldn't let go of her stolen script. A girl who mistook other people's pain for background noise in her fairy tale. She wasn't evil. Just lost. And I couldn't waste one more second trying to save her. That night I sat by the window of my barak room. The stars looked different in Nanshire. Fewer. Duller. But peaceful in a way I hadn't felt since childhood. Veronica Lane had come to rewrite her story again. But I had already written mine. With my blood. With my voice. With truth. 3 years passed. In that time I graduated second in my class, led 2 successful investigations into cross-border smuggling, and received a personal commendation from the provincial deputy. I wore the uniform now. Not just as cloth but as armor. The name stitched into the pocket, Officer Lillian Moore, wasn't just mine anymore. It belonged to every version of me that had been beaten, humiliated, burned, and left behind. When they asked for volunteers to return to Oak Ridge for a temporary assignment in political restructuring, I didn't hesitate. I wanted to go back. Not for them. For me. The village had changed. Paved roads now curved past what used to be rice paddies. There was a new public library, a medical hall with real lighting, and a central radio tower that hummed with the buzz of modernity. But some things were exactly the same. The scent of damp soil after early autumn rain. The weight of the air. And the ghosts that still lingered in the corners of old brick homes. I walked past the brigade office, the one where Veronica once pretended to faint for applause. Now it stood dusty, silent, half-abandoned. Progress had moved on without her. And so had I. My first visit was to the Lynn household. Mr. Lynn had passed during a harsh winter 2 years ago, I was told, but Jean, now nearly 14, still lived there alone, sweeping the same stone steps each morning like a ritual of grief. Do you remember me? I asked gently. He nodded, solemn and small. You were the only one who gave me gloves when I was cold. I smiled, knelt beside him and handed him a sealed letter. Inside was an official scholarship placement for the Academy's junior preparatory track in Nanshire. A real school, he whispered. A real future, I said. His eyes brimmed. And for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, mine did too. I saw Caleb that afternoon. He was standing by the granary, thinner now, more weathered. His shirt clung to his shoulders like guilt. He froze when he saw me in uniform. You came back, he said. For work, I replied. He tried to hold my gaze, but something in him faltered. You look strong. I am. He took a step forward. Lillian. I shook my head before he could finish. Whatever sentence he had rehearsed, it didn't belong in my life anymore. He nodded, finally understanding. And I walked away. The last stop I made wasn't planned. A crumbling home at the end of a lane that had once been pristine. Peeling paint. A broken window. Silence inside. But I felt her before I saw her. Veronica. She sat by the window like a phantom in a cracked mirror, watching me like she had been waiting forever. She didn't rise. Didn't smile. Just stared, hollow and hunched, her beauty worn down to bone. I knew you'd come, she said. I didn't come for you. She nodded. Still, you came. Silence sat between us like the years we both remembered but never spoke of. Do you ever think, she whispered, if we'd both made different choices, we could have ended up on the same side? No, I said flatly. Because you never wanted a future. You wanted mine. She flinched. Then softer, more desperate. Why you, Lillian? Why not me? I was smarter. I knew more. I got there first. Why did it work for you? I took a slow breath. Because this was the question. The one buried under every betrayal, every desperate scheme, Every lie she told herself to keep believing her story made sense. So I told her the truth. Because I didn't forget, I said. I remembered who I was. Even when you tried to erase it. She didn't cry. She just closed her eyes. And in that moment I saw not a villain. Not even a rival. Just a girl who had built her entire life on the wrong version of the past. I left her there. Not in hatred. Not in triumph. Just in peace. Because she was no longer a chapter in my story. She was just a footnote. I left Oak Ridge at dusk. The train rumbled past the fields like a heartbeat finally steady. I stared out the window and watched my old world shrink behind me. No more stolen futures. No more names that weren't mine. No more ghosts. Only this truth. I had been broken. But not buried. They took everything. And I built a future anyway. One that belonged to me. The end.